Ever catch yourself thinking about those jobs that are a little bit, off the beaten path, the
Yeah.
ones that make you go, wait, people actually do that for a living?
Right.
Well, today we're taking a deep dive into one of those professions, hearse drivers.
It's an interesting one, right? I mean, you don't often think about it, but hearse drivers, they're there for families during some of the toughest, most sensitive times.
Absolutely. And thankfully, we have RoleCatcher's hearse driver, the
Oh.
complete career guide, to kind of walk us through it.
Yeah, they're a job search and career development platform, and they've really done a deep dive on this one. So
They have. So let's jump right in. What does a hearse driver actually do? Is it as simple as it sounds?
well, transporting the deceased is a big part of it, but it's not just driving. They have to transport, from funeral homes, hospitals, sometimes even private residences. And then there are the logistics of the funeral processions, the
Aye.
timing, the protocol. It's a lot more than just driving.
And I imagine interacting with grieving families has to be,
Yeah.
it's its own thing.
Huge part of the job. It requires a tremendous amount of empathy, compassion. It's about creating a sense of calm and support during a really, really difficult time. A hearse driver isn't just driving a vehicle, they're really playing a vital role in a family's final goodbye.
Yeah. We're gonna circle back to that human element a little bit later on, but for now, let's talk about the work environment. What can a hearse driver expect in terms of where they're spending their time?
Well, you're going to see a lot of funeral homes, cemeteries, sometimes even places of worship. And the guide mentions that technology is really starting to change the landscape of funeral services.
It's interesting.
Things like online planning tools, digital memorials. Some funerals are even offering video conferencing now.
Wow. I honestly hadn't even considered the impact of technology on this profession. But are there any constants? Like, what about the physical demands?
Oh, yeah, it's definitely not a desk job. Lifting and maneuvering caskets, you need strength, stamina, and drivers often have to work in some pretty tight spaces, sometimes in bad weather.
Right, right. So it seems like hearse driving really requires this interesting balance of physical strength, emotional intelligence, and even some adaptability. But what would make someone actually want to do this?
That's a great question. And the guide actually shed some light on that. One of the biggest perks they point out is flexibility.
Flexibility. That's not usually the first thing that comes to mind when I think about, the funeral industry.
Exactly. But it makes sense when you think about it being able to set your own hours to a certain degree. I mean, that could be huge for someone who values autonomy or maybe has other commitments, family or whatever.
Yeah, that makes sense. I could see that being a big plus. But I'm guessing flexibility alone doesn't tell the whole story.
Yeah.
What else does the guide say about what draws people to this kind of work?
Well, it talks about a sense of purpose a lot of Hertz drivers find. They see themselves as more than just drivers, right? They're helping people through a really tough time, providing this dignified, respectful final journey.
Yeah, yeah, I get that. It's a behind-the-scenes role, but an important one, for sure. And speaking of different roles, the guide actually mentions specializations within hearse driving.
It's true, there's more to it than you might think.
Like what kind of specializations are we talking about?
Well, some drivers focus on those long distance transports, making sure everything goes smoothly when the deceased has to be transported, a long way.
Wow. I can only imagine the stories behind some of those trips. Are there any other specializations that really stand out?
Yeah, they also talk about drivers who work specifically with certain religious or cultural communities,
Ah,
which obviously requires a deep understanding of those specific customs and traditions.
right, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes sense. You need to be really sensitive to all those different practices. But what about someone who's been doing this for a while and maybe wants to, move up in I don't know what the right term is, the hearse driving world? What are their options?
Well, the guide's pretty upfront about the fact there isn't a ton of room for like straight up promotion within hearse driving itself.
Okay.
But they do suggest some alternative career paths within the funeral industry that might be a good fit.
Like what?
Well, some hearse drivers end up becoming funeral directors. They can use their experience and compassion to kind of take on a bigger role in planning and running funeral services.
Makes sense.
And then others might become morticians.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So they combine their knowledge of the funeral process with the skills of preparing the deceased.
So it's like starting as a hearse driver could actually be a stepping stone to a whole career in the funeral industry.
Mm.
That's actually pretty cool. But let's shift gears a bit and imagine we're getting ready for a hearse driver job interview. What kind of questions should we be prepared for?
Oh, this is where the RoleCatcher guide really shines. They have this whole section on interview prep with 10 example questions to give you an idea of what to expect.
Okay, give us the highlights. What are some of the questions that really stood out?
Well, one that comes to mind is, how would you handle a situation where, a family member of the deceased becomes really overwhelmed during the service?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Right.
It really gets at the emotional intelligence needed for the job. What else?
Another one is, what are your thoughts on the changing role of technology in funeral services? So they definitely want to see that you're adaptable, forward thinking.
Yeah, they're not just looking for someone who can drive. They want someone who understands, like, the weight of the situation.
Exactly. And that's where RoleCatcher's job search tools come in. And not just for hearse drivers, for anyone looking for a job.
Okay, so tell us more about RoleCatcher. What do they offer?
Well, their platform connects to a bunch of different job boards, so you can see everything in one place. And they've got stuff like a resume builder, interview questions specific to different industries, even AI feedback on practice interviews.
Wait, hold on. AI feedback on practice interviews?
Yeah.
That's wild. It's like having your own personal interview coach.
Right. They've really thought of everything to make the job search less stressful, more effective. Whether you're interested in hearse driving or something totally different, preparation is key.
Yeah, it sounds like RoleCatcher could be a lifesaver,
Definitely.
especially in today's job market.
Yeah.
But I have to imagine that even with the best tools, this particular job,
Yeah.
it has to have its own kind of unique challenges.
It does. You're right. There's a big emotional component,
Right.
and the guide really emphasizes that.
Okay.
The need for resilience, strong coping mechanisms. It's not easy.
Yeah, to see that much grief, that much loss, day in and day out,
Yeah.
it takes a certain type of person. Does the guide talk about how hearse drivers kind of deal with that weight,
Mm.
emotionally?
They do. They talk about the importance of self-care, finding ways to decompress after work,
Right.
leaning on your support system, whether it's family, friends, other people in the profession.
It's a good reminder that we all need support no matter what we do. We've covered a lot of ground here, the
Yeah.
ins and outs of the job, the industry trends,
Mm-hmm.
even the tools to find a job. But I'm still stuck on that first question we had.
Oh, yeah.
What kind of person is drawn to this line of work?
It's a fascinating question. It really is. I mean, maybe it's someone with just this deep well of empathy.
Right.
Someone who really finds meaning in helping others through those difficult times.
Or maybe it's someone who, I don't know, just appreciates the quiet dignity of it all.
Yeah, yeah. Providing this essential service without needing a lot of fanfare.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just someone who wants something different.
Right.
A job that makes you think about life and loss in a different way.
It's probably a little bit of everything. Everyone's different.
Sure.
But no matter what their motivation is, I think we can agree that hearse drivers, they play a really important role.
They do. They really do. They offer this service that's, it's essential, but it's also deeply, deeply human.
It is.
And on that note, we'll leave you with this. What drives you? What are you passionate about? And where will that passion lead you? Keep those questions in mind and keep exploring. Until next time, happy job hunting.